All right, and welcome back again to the Paisan Sports podcast. Dante DePlacido, joined by Zach Deal. And speaking of Deal, Zach, I got to ask, what's the deal? I had to think about that for a second. My
What was the
mind.
pause there for a second? I thought you were
I
buffering.
forgot. I forgot what
You
I
were,
was.
you
I
were
forgot
buffering over there.
what I was going to do. What's the deal?
I thought you were
Well, all
literally
right, all
buffering.
right, all right, all right. We'll take it from the top. Joined by Zach Deal. And speaking of Deal, I gotta ask, what's the deal with Hoagie Fest? How come when Wawa does a Hoagie Fest, Kyle Schwarber starts hitting bombs? What are they putting in those hoagies?
Do they still have his drink on the menu?
I
That
don't
recharging
know.
drink?
Yeah, they called it the Schwarbomb.
I
They
bet
started.
the reason why I asked that is I bet they still have it available for him. I just don't know if they still have it available for the public. So maybe he's just chugging those and he's back on his game. So he looks
I
like Husky
think
Schwarber out
I
there
think
with all
there's
the bombs
something.
and
I
steam
think
power.
there's something in those hoagies. Um, but yeah, they originally started. Microphone's been backwards this whole time. It's been a long day for me. I had to drive all the way to Galloway and back. It's been a whole thing.
Now, stop the complaining, dude. You're talking sports
Anyhow,
for a living. Come on.
anyhow. Yeah, they originally started doing the Schwarbomb drink, um, when it was going into the postseason in 2022. Somebody had pointed out the fact that all of Schwarber's June home runs came during Hoagie Fest. So they brought back Hoagie Fest just for the sake of that, including the Schwarbomb drink, and Schwarber caught fire yet again. So it's something about those discounted hoagies that really gets Schwarber going in the month of June.
What kind of hoagie do you think Kyle Schwarber gets?
2 home runs tonight, plus a 441-foot bomb, which I thought was going to land in the Padres bullpen, by the way. Schwarber strikes me. I can see him doing a roast turkey.
A roast turkey, you think? I don't know. I think he's like a chili dog kind of guy, dude.
No, he seems like that on the surface, but really, he's a roast turkey guy. His
Kind of.
exterior says chili dog, but he's a roast turkey guy. He's a roast turkey guy.
What's your selection on Hoagie Fest while we're talking on the subject?
You know what? Since we're not sponsored by Wawa, I don't have to give a fake answer, and I will say I don't get hoagies from Wawa.
Oh, that's fair. You're more of a
If I
Primo's
do, but if I
Pal Jones
do,
kind of guy.
yeah, definitely Pal Joey's 100%. I mean, why? I got right across the street from me. Why would I go to Wawa when I got Pal Joey's right there? But sometimes it's a Sunday, Pal Joey's is closed, or it's past 6 o'clock. In which case, I'll get like a ham and Swiss on a ciabatta from Wawa.
Ham and Swiss. Are you kidding me? That's
Oh
like
yeah.
one of the. I don't even think I've ever had a ham and Swiss sandwich from anywhere.
Oh, who doesn't like
Just
a ham and
mediocre.
Swiss? A ham and Swiss is a classic.
Nah, it's
You
mediocre. If I'm
can't
going
beat.
ham, I'm more so. I don't like if I'm eating a hoagie. I'm a big turkey guy, but ham is all right. Like I like Italian hoagies, but just ham by itself is just very underwhelming to me.
As a proud Italian, I don't really like Italian hoagies that much because I don't like gabagool. I've just never really liked it. So, but I mean, I'll eat Italian sandwiches. Like I'll go to Pal Joey's, I'll get the super side and the fresh mozzarella. That's more Italian than the Italian
Yeah, with
hoagie.
your fake Italian Metagon accent there.
People in Italy aren't getting Italian hoagies. They're getting super side and fresh mozzarella. You know what I mean? You ever watch that guy on TikTok who runs a sandwich shop in Italy? He's not throwing gabagool and the other Italian meats together with lettuce and tomato and onion and all that nonsense. No, it's just you got your fresh mozzarella and you got one of your Italian deli meats, maybe some arugula, balsamic glaze. Forget about it. That's the real Italian hoagie. Not this fugazi crap the Metagons came up with.
Well, that's the thing about all the Americanized dishes where they try to be it from a culture, but they're really
Yeah,
not the same. Like the
yeah, and,
Chinese.
and that's what Italian hoagie is. Same thing with like hard shell tacos; those don't exist in Mexico. General Tao chicken. That's a
General
thing.
Sal's chicken? General Tao's
General Tso's chicken, whatever. That was also made up in America because the General Tso, when he was a general in China, everybody was saying, "Listen, General Tso's chicken." That's how General Tso's chicken. No, that's a stolen joke from South Park, but no, it is an Americanized dish as well.
from Shitty Walk.
You want shitty chicken, shitty rice?
I got to get back to watching South Park. I haven't watched in a minute, but you know what I am watching, Dante?
The
There's a lot
fighting.
of sports.
I was
So
gonna
let's
say
kick it
fighting.
off. It's baseball season. I'm energized with the return of two of the better players in the Phillies lineup. We got Trey Turner back today. We got Brandon Marsh back on Saturday. Brandon Marsh had a little bit of a rough start.
Well, he had a rough start yesterday. He had a good game today.
No, I'm saying, yeah, today. He also had that error, though, which he allowed somebody to get a double out of a ball that he could have easily grounded. But, there's no complaints today. I think the Phillies ended with, 18 hits tonight?
18 hits. 18 hits.
Four coming from
the
their
back of
third-string considered catcher.
Rafael Marchand.
Third-string catcher. I think tonight is one of the nights that he carves out more of a role and might overtake the 50-50 split from Garrett Stubbs. He just shows more out there. And one thing that's surprising about Marchand is he's kind of fast. He ran out that infield single, too. He's got a little bit of when you're looking at him, you don't really expect him to be able to get down the base path the way that he got down today. But, I was pleasantly surprised by that.
When he hit that ball through the infield, I didn't think he was actually going to beat it out. I think Manny Machado gave him a pretty good shot to beat it out by kind of angling himself to barehand it, but then he turned his body to grab it with the glove and then had to pull out and fire. He wasted a good bit of time on that, which gave Marchand a good shot, but I didn't think, even with that, Marchand was going to be able to beat it out.
Especially on a guy like Manny Machado, who's known as one of the best third basemen defensively in the entire league and has been for a very long time. So, but I feel like a lot of those situations, the thing that you have to give credit towards is the effort from Marchand too, is because a lot of people, I feel like they could give a little bit more effort on the base path and running out infield singles, and they just don't. And that's something at times Bryce Harper doesn't do, is he doesn't run out every single ball that he could run out. But people are saying it's the long stretch. You don't want to get injured doing this, that, the other. And that's serious though.
That's the thing too, is when you're a guy who just got the call back up to the majors after not being in the majors since, 2022? It might have even been 2021 was the last time we saw him up here. I think 2022. You know what I mean? You're trying to make a name for yourself any way that you can. So you're really hustling. And not only did he have the 4 hits today, he got his second throw out since being called back up. Throwing out Hassan Kim trying to swipe second on an absolute bullet. That I don't remember if it was Stott or Turner covering second. I think it might have been Stott, but I mean he just fired it directly into Stott's glove to where all he had to do was just catch it and just drop it down onto Kim's helmet. An absolute bullet.
And like you said, not to cut you off, but the offense was there today for the Phillies, which a couple games, especially over the weekend series, their bats were a little bit dead. But speaking of Bryson Stott, he made that phenomenal play, even though a run scored on Christopher Sanchez. But the scoop with the glove, that was perfection. So it was really good.
I thought you were going to refer to the other great play he made, which was that leaping catch.
Well, he's known for doing that. That's a signature play for them.
So 2 phenomenal plays. But before we get back to the rest of the Phillies, I just want to say that my third note on Rafael Marchand, not just his arm behind the plate, not just his bat. By the way, he batted .297 in AAA last season. But not just his arm, not just his bat, but the pitching has been better with Marchand behind the plate.
Well, that's what I was going to get to too, is because he's actually really good at framing. He had a lot of pitches that were kind of low in the strike zone, and he kind of framed them really well. So
he's good at framing, but I'm also starting to think maybe he's better at calling the games, because look at the past 4 games, right? Monday, Sunday, Saturday, Friday. Okay, Saturday and Sunday, you had Stubbs behind the plate. You had on the mound two of your top pitchers, Zach Wheeler and Aaron Nola. Both gave up 8 runs, which for Nola, like he's having a great season, but it's not that surprising. For Wheeler, that's very uncharacteristic. Then you look at Friday and Monday, the 2 games Marchand has been behind the plate. Ranger had an excellent outing on Friday. Granted, it is Ranger Suarez who's having a phenomenal season, but Zach Wheeler's having a phenomenal season as well. And then Christopher Sanchez tonight went 7 innings, giving up only 1 earned run. So the pitching has been far better with Rafael Marchand behind the plate. And I'm wondering if he has something to do with that. Maybe he's just better at calling the games than Garrett Stubbs is.
Well, I mean, it's not really, not to be disrespectful or anything, but it's not that hard to be a better option out there than Garrett Stubbs. I think we all know what Garrett Stubbs is. But also, I will say, in fairness to Garrett Stubbs and Marchand himself, the Orioles lineup is just really tricky. And that's a team that could go pretty far in the playoffs. Not only do they bat well, they pretty much do everything well. And the one thing that's
Wheeler
scary
faces plenty of tricky lineups. He never gives up 8 runs, you know?
I know, but the Orioles just crank dinger after dinger after dinger, and it's just everybody in their lineup can hit. Anthony Santander absolutely baptized.
Yeah, he's really picked it up this season. He's having a phenomenal year. Gunnar Henderson, he's having an absolute
beast. Adley Rutschman, switch hitter. That lineup is just really, really tricky to get a hold of. So the starting pitching this past week wasn't great. I think we talked about so much about Marchand. I think the last time we did the podcast, the JT injury news wasn't even out. So we'll touch on that a little bit. He had a torn knee. I think he already had the procedure, and he's already moving around and walking around. So that's a good thing to see.
He's looking good. But you texted me when it was announced that JT was going to be out for a bit. And I texted you. I said I would like to see Marchand get more starts than Stubbs. And I mean, so far it was a well-justified statement.
Well, the thing for the London series is I think they had to bring like 3 extra players. That was like the requirement in case of any type of thing that would happen. But I don't know if they did that mindfully knowing that JT was already banged up or it was already to the point. I would assume that they already knew JT was kind of banged up a little bit, and he's just been taking his fair share of hits behind the plate too. I mean, from the balls going off the forearms, just balls skipping around all over the place. And, and that was also a crazy play, the Marchand, which tied the game the other day when he dove back on the wild pitch and dove back to the plate. I mean, those type of things just happen to any catcher out there. But, so far with JT out of the lineup, I mean, it sucks because we knew the looming return of Trey Turner and Brandon Marsh was coming, and we thought we'd be at full strength, but that wasn't the case with JT going down. And JT, it's not a light thing. I mean, sometimes you say, oh, the catcher, he's really important on defense, but we don't really rely on him offensively. But you saw with the type of lineups that they had to go to without JT in the lineup, they had to go put Bryson Stott in the cleanup role, which he just doesn't have enough pop in the bat to really sit in that role. I don't even know if Alec Boehm has enough pop in the bat to be in that role, even though he drives in a lot of runs. You kind of,
I think that's all that really matters is how many. I think that's really all that matters. I mean, the whole theory behind the cleanup hitter is he comes up with a couple guys on base. It's his job to drive them in, and that's exactly what Alec Boehm has been doing to the tune of 60 RBIs this season. A 3-run homer tonight. I'm mad at myself. I almost put money on an Alec Boehm home run because I figured, you know what, he's getting hot. He's due to hit a home run now. I almost put money on Phillies win, Alec Boehm home run, Trey Turner base hit. I just didn't pull the trigger. It would have won me a good bit of money. I should have done it.
That pitch was literally right down the middle. I mean, there was nothing else that Alec Boehm could do other than hit that ball out of the ballpark. So that was good to see, just for somebody that just needs to see the ball go over the fence sometimes. And hopefully he can improve on his batting. But that's the one thing that kind of scares me a little bit because we haven't really seen any pop from Trey when he has been healthy this year. And it just seems like if Kyle Schwarber and Bryce Harper aren't hitting home runs, then it's harder for them to produce home runs. But Marchand hit one the other day, so he's definitely doing his part. And Castellanos, he's kind of fluctuating a little bit, just being the normal Castellanos. His batting average is still really down from earlier in the season, but he's kind of getting back to his form a little bit now. So,
The other thing that you mentioned briefly, but I want to talk about is, you know, Edmundo Sosa's role moving forward now that Trey Turner's back. Reports were out today that the Phillies are working out Edmundo Sosa in left field, kind of preparing for him to play out there. I think from what I heard, they just want to give him the day off today. Trey Turner's back, but I think moving forward, you're going to see a lot of left field starts by Edmundo Sosa, which I think makes a ton of sense. I'm not sold on David Dahl out there in left. I love the idea of an outfield with Marsh and Sosa while still having Trey Turner in the infield. And then, once JT gets back, then, I mean, this is something I brought up on last week's podcast when we were talking about the possibility of trading for Luis Robert Jr. But I mean, sort of the same thing then at that point where your worst hitter is either Marsh or Castellanos, really. I guess maybe Costi, maybe Sosa, but I mean, like if those are the worst hitters on your team, then that's a pretty damn good offense if that's your worst hitter. So
Yeah,
I
and speaking of
love
that, we didn't even mention that Rojas got sent down to AAA today. So
yeah.
AAA was something that he skipped. He went from AA to the majors originally, and he went back down to AAA. So that kind of gives more confidence towards the situation of Sosa actually playing in the outfield, because if they keep David Dahl on the roster, even though they can't send him down, he would have not had an option, and he could have been picked up off the waivers by
I wouldn't
somebody.
be surprised
Kind of
if they
just shows that they're
moved
trying to
him at
figure
some
something
point.
out. So
I wouldn't be
I
surprised
really want.
if he's thrown into a deadline trade or something. I mean, I think he needs to prove himself to stay up here in the big leagues. I think, with the timing of Trey Turner returning, he had just gotten called up because of the March injury and hasn't really played a whole lot. And, he's riding off that minor league resume this season of batting 340 with 12 home runs. But I mean, he's after the home run when he first got called up. He struggled since, and I think he's going to need to prove himself and start hitting better if he wants to stay up here.
Yeah, for sure. I think more so they like the lefty bat to replace Marsh, because you also got to go handedness while, obviously having Edmundo Sosa up there. Rojas was a right-handed batter, so that kind of matches up with the replacement for him. So I think Edmundo Sosa in left field is definitely something we could see. I think Whit Merrifield's definitely going to get his opportunities. And then when Sosa's not playing in the outfield, you can still spell him for numerous different infield positions. So, and maybe you
Yeah,
give Bryce a day off every so often. You put Edmundo Sosa at third, and then you move Alec Boehm over to first. And you can just, now you have a lot more tools in the tool shed to be able to use and give guys breaks. And I even think when JT comes back from injury, even though we're a long way away from that happening, Marchand could be the guy that is the backup catcher, and maybe they give JT more normal rest than he was getting before the injury, just to keep him fresh for the playoff run.
Yeah, I mean, right now I'm loving Marchand a whole lot more than Garrett Stubbs. I think going into the playoffs, I think you should definitely keep Stubbs on the roster over Marchand because, I mean, the backup catcher is not going to see any time in the postseason, and Garrett Stubbs is just that locker room presence you want for the postseason. I wouldn't be surprised if maybe when JT comes back, Marchand goes back to AAA just so he can continue developing as a starting catcher. He's still a young guy. He's only 25. So it might be a good move to give him a lot more at bats in AAA than have him be the backup catcher up here. But
There's just certain situations that you got to think about too. Is that there's been guys that have been a flash in the pan and a pleasant surprise at that, like a guy like Derek Hall, and we haven't seen Derek Hall in how long? You know what I mean? After he was up in the majors for a little bit, he added a little bit of pop to the lineup when they were struggling at first base and didn't have an option with Reese Hoskins out for the year, and then Bryce before he even moved over to first base. So. Maybe that's just the case with Marchand, and he's just playing a really good role right now. But
I'm hoping he continues to play really well. I mean, I did mention, he batted 297 in AAA last year. So I'm really hoping he continues to keep it going. I'm hoping they start him more than Stubbs moving forward. But then, the other guy I did want to talk about that you mentioned, Johan Rojas. now optioned to AAA. I think that's a really good move for him. Put him down to AAA, let him work on his swing a bit more, get his confidence back up. Meanwhile, you run an outfield with Marsh and Edmundo Sosa for right now. Maybe if you throw David Dahl into a trade on the deadline, maybe that's when you bring Rojas back up into the majors. I just think, he's still a young guy. He still has a ton of upside, still phenomenal in the outfield. I think some time in AAA is going to be really good for him.
Yeah, I could see Rojas even being down in the minors for a little bit of time, and then maybe if an injury or something presents itself, like Dahl's not on the roster, like you said, they can bring him back up. And I wouldn't even be surprised if, even though it's a long way out from now, if Rojas was on the 26-man playoff roster just based off of what he provides as a base runner and a defensive outfielder. So, the story's not done with Johan Rojas and the Phillies. Maybe they even throw him in a trade since they move him down to the minors and somebody sees that and he's kind of got some tools that you can work with, and maybe you get, because you got to think, the Angels gave up on Brandon Marsh and they didn't think he was as good of a hitter as he now is with the Phillies, and that's something that Dave Dombrowski said when he first traded for Brandon Marsh, was he saw that he could really improve his hitting, which he has. He just has to be a little bit better versus lefties. So
I think if we had a nickel for every time we've quoted that press conference and that statement from that press conference on this podcast, I think we would. I think we'd be very rich right now. We would be doing the podcast from each of our penthouses atop the podcast building. So, but yeah, no, it's definitely a possibility. We did mention last week that, or I'm not sure if we mentioned it last week on the podcast or if we mentioned it off air, but we did mention that if the Phillies give up a center fielder and the trade for Luis Robert Jr., we both prefer it would be Johan Rojas over Justin Crawford. So that is something that's definitely,
and that might actually present more value to a team because they know that Johan Rojas can play at the major league level. And it's not like he can't play at the major league level and he's that bad of a hitter. He's batting 230, 240. It's just what he does as a hitter doesn't really benefit the Phillies at the current moment. So, and I wouldn't even be opposed to holding on to him. There's just a lot of good options out there. Whit Merrifield being optioned down, which he didn't have options, was never really a plan. I think they were going to stick out regardless of how well he played. So that's another guy they can platoon into the mix with all the guys. So they actually have a lot of security, even with the injuries that have come across the whole roster. So, they got a bunch of versatile guys that can play all over the place. And if you get Edmundo Sosa playing the outfield too, now you have two guys in Whit Merrifield and him that can play infield and outfield. And that's just a very valuable piece.
That is very valuable. Before we move on to our next Phillies segment, I want to properly transition ourselves into it by giving you my Meatball of the Week. And my Meatball of the Week, I don't even remember his name, but it was one of the Fox broadcasters during the London series. And I seem to be the only one who caught this. But this broadcaster said that Alec Bohm was a sleeper pick for the All-Star game this year. A sleeper pick. That is a direct quote. Alec Bohm is a sleeper pick for the All-Star game this year. And the All-Star ballots were released today. And Alec Bohm is ahead by almost 800,000 votes in first place for National League third baseman. And he was referred to as a sleeper pick. The guy ahead by 800,000 votes. He has more votes than Shohei Ohtani.
Well, I think that has a lot to do with the big, gigantic fan base of the Phillies.
Yeah,
You know what I mean? If it was a number, if the market wasn't as big, because we can't not highlight that Alec Bohm has been struggling in the months of May and June. But
how many hits did he have today?
We're talking about one game out of how many games? We're
talking
about
in the past 5 games, he has 9 RBIs. Okay.
Before the Orioles series,
what was highlighted Alec Bohm's struggles going into the Baltimore series. I'd agree with you. But this past week, I mean, he's red hot. Let's not talk about any struggles
I
right
don't
now.
think he should be fluctuating the way that he is fluctuating, though. I think he needs to
It's
be
a
a little
long
bit more
season.
steady.
Everyone fluctuates. It's a long season. He's still batting like 307. I don't know. He was 309 before the ground out in the 8th inning. So maybe like 307. He's batting 307. He's got 60 RBI. He's having a phenomenal year. He
Yeah,
struggled
I'm not
for
taking anything
a
away from
couple
him.
of weeks. Couple of weeks he struggled for. Whatever. It's
It
a
was
long
like a
season.
month. It was like a month. Don't
It's
downplay
not
it a little bit,
long.
but
Yeah,
he's coming back to his own now, so that's all we can ask for. And I just really like the way that this team's set up between having numerous guys from different sides of the plate. I mean, if they had a switch hitter, though, that would be frightening a little bit if they could mix in a switch hitter, which I don't know if there's anything available out there. I was actually going to ask you about a guy that got released just for some depth at the first base position, Jose Abreu. Got released by the Astros. Would you have any interest in bringing him in and not having to give up anything to bring him in?
I don't know about that because I mean, you don't really have a lot of depth at the first base position, but you do have Alec Boehm who you can play at first base. When Cody Clemens comes back, that's another guy you can play at first. I don't know. I'd rather use all our. No, I guess it wouldn't really hurt to
Do you
sign
think
him.
Cody Clemens is going to have a roster spot when he comes back healthy, though?
Yeah, maybe not. But that is depth you have in AAA. You know. Oh, you know what? By the way, speaking of the minors, speaking of the Paisan Sports podcast, I don't know if you caught this during the broadcast, but the highlighted minor leaguer during the game was a guy by the name of Sam Aldiguieri, who is actually an off-the-boat Italian pitching for the Jersey Shore Blue Claws, who
Nice.
pitched 6 shutout innings, giving up only 2 hits, 2
Sounds like a
walks.
Jersey Shore type of guy, too.
I think he had 9 strikeouts. Sam Aldiguieri, off the boat Italian, playing for the Jersey Shore Blue Claws. I think right now, this is so random and off topic, but I think right now the Blue Claws are, as must watch as they're ever gonna get. Because right now they have Aiden Miller, who is raking right now ever since getting called up a few days ago. They have Justin Crawford down there. They have this guy apparently. I'm planning on eventually going all the way up there. I think it's in like somewhere near Tom's River-ish. I think Hamilton. I don't know. I forget which shore town they play in, but yeah, I think I might go to a Jersey Shore Blue Claws game at some point because they have a lot of intriguing prospects down there right now.
I haven't even been to the bank yet this year, so I definitely got to get to the bank at some point.
Yeah, you got to get to the bank. Anyway, though, back to the All-Star game ballots. Back to that because there's a good bit to talk about. Some intriguing notes. Of course, Alec Boehm with as many votes as he has. You have Bryce Harper also above 1 million votes, while in first place for first baseman.
And Bryce Harper has yet to be an all-star as a part of the Philadelphia Phillies.
That's not true. No, he's yet to participate in an all-star game. He was voted all-star the one year, and then he got hurt. I didn't participate in the all-star game, but he was selected to the all-star team that year. I believe that was 2022. Yeah, because then he came back late from injury. So yeah, 2022. Harper was selected to the All-Star game. I'm trying to find. Here's the post for the All-Star game ballots. So yeah, Harper well ahead in first place for first baseman with 1.1 million votes.
Who's second? Freddie Freeman.
Yeah, Freddie Freeman has 713,000, and then it's just a massive drop off to Matt Olson in third place with 154,000 votes. Catcher JT Realmuto in second place right now, which would get you an all-star selection, but by a smidge. He's at 558,000 votes. Will Smith on the Dodgers is at 557,000 votes. And JT's currently hurt, so I think Will Smith is going to end up surpassing him there. Second baseman Bryson Stott's in third place, just outside of reach, with 486,000 votes. Ketel Marte has 608,000. Shortstop Trey Turner is second on his way to an All-Star selection after missing a ton of time.
With Mookie Betts probably in first, right?
Yeah, Mookie Betts is well ahead in
Well,
first.
Mookie Betts, that's the big thing too, is the Phillies have a 4-game lead for the number 1 seed in the National League, and another National League foe, a team that they're going to match up with at some point down the line, had just took a huge blow, and a very
Yeah, Mookie
reminiscent of
Betts
what
is out
happened to
for
Bryce
6 to
Harper,
8
with Mookie
weeks.
Betts taking the 100-mile-per-hour fastball off the hand yesterday
Yeah.
and fracturing his hand. So he's going to miss some time, and that could give the Phillies some time. They just got one of their best players back, and one of their foes just lost one of their best players, so they can make up a lot of ground. I think right now they're 8 games back before the game started today, or 8 games ahead of the Braves for the NL East when play started today. So they have a comfortable lead there.
I'm gonna check in on the Braves real fast. But yeah, so Trey Turner is behind Mookie Betts with 509,000 votes, and behind him, all the way at 324,000 votes, is Ellie De La Cruz. Braves won today, by the way. So Trey Turner on his way to an All-Star selection after missing a ton of time. So that's kind of funny. And then here's where it gets even funnier. The outfielders, okay? So 6 outfielders get selected to the All-Star game. In 5th place is Brandon Marsh, 521,000 votes. Brandon Marsh having a good year. I don't know if he's all-star material, but whatever.
I don't think anybody on the Phillies outfield deserves to be in the All-Star game, if we're being completely honest.
I think
maybe if you consider
out of the 3 guys I'm going to name, Marsh deserves it the most, though, because then right on his tail, in 6th place, set to make the All-Star team, is Nick Castellanos with 439,000
I'm
votes.
a Nick Castellanos guy. I mean, I'm not like a Nick Castellanos guy, but
it gets funnier. It gets funnier. Right behind Nick Castellanos in 7th place, 363,000 votes, Johan Rojas,
who's not even in the major leagues as we currently are speaking. So that actually kind of makes me mad. That actually does make me mad. I like the fan base giving all the support out there, but we got to be a little bit more realistic. And
I'm going to tell you why. No, I'm going to tell you why it doesn't make me mad. I'm going to tell you why the fan base is so unrealistic this year is because last year the Braves did the same exact thing. Most of their lineup ended up going to the All-Star game. It was absolutely
and they hit how many home runs as a team last year?
How many home runs are we hitting as a team this year?
Not even close to what the Braves produced last year.
But still, I mean, our offense is laying up. We had 18 hits tonight.
But, yeah, I still can't get over that.
But no, this is really just retaliation by the Phillies fan base for what the Braves pulled off last year. So I'm all here for it. Rojas obviously is going to end up making the All-Star game. He's well behind Castellanos. He's only a little bit ahead of Cody Bellinger, and now he's sitting in AAA. So Bellinger is going to end up overtaking him for that 7th spot. And then finally for designated hitters, in 2nd place with 478,000 votes is Ozuna from the Braves in 2nd place. And then in 3rd place with 435,000 votes, just 40,000 behind him, is Kyle Schwarber.
He's cooking like he's cooking in June right now. I think
if he keeps having,
I got to give it to Ozuna though. Ozuna's definitely been doing his thing. And then who's number 1
from the Braves?
Shohei Ohtani, probably, right?
Ozuna from the Braves, refer to him by his proper name. But yeah, I mean, if Schwarber continues to have a absolutely stellar June, I could definitely see him surpassing Ozuna for that 2nd spot, making the All-Star game. And then just one more notable thing, right behind Kyle Schwarber, well, not right behind him, 300,000 votes behind him, but in 4th place is Rhys Hoskins of the now of the Milwaukee Brewers. So yeah, that's it for the National League. A lot of Phillies players on here. I actually heard the Phillies have the chance to have the 2nd most All-Star appearances in one season of all time. Because this is just the hitters. This isn't including whatever pitchers are on their way. Yeah. I'm imagining, Wheeler, Ranger, possibly Nola, Matt Strahm. So with this plus the pitchers, a lot of All-Star game appearances set to come for the Phillies this year, which is nice because even in the years they've been doing good recently, we've only gotten like 1 or 2 All-Stars each year. Last year it was
Bryce won the MVP without being voted to the All-Star game that year.
Yeah, that was 2021. Last year we had Costi and I forget who else. We didn't have a lot of representation at the All-Star game last year either. So it's good to see. I think even as ridiculous as this is with like Johan Rojas being the first outfielder off the list, it's like, you know what? It's ridiculous, but we kind of deserve it. You know,
I think at minimum, even with if the vote changes drastically, I think at minimum they'll end up with 4. And I think you have to put Strom in there. You have to put Wheeler in there. Rangers most likely going to make it.
Ranger, absolutely. Ranger and Wheeler are locks, in my opinion.
Do you think Ranger might have a better chance than Wheeler if it came down to it for whatever reason?
I think maybe Wheeler just off of name recognition, but I mean everybody's aware of what Ranger Suarez is doing this year. Like every actual true baseball fan this year is well aware of what's going on with Ranger Suarez. Maybe the more casual fans might recognize.
I think he also gets a little bit of a boost too because the way that he pitches too, it makes it even more impressive because it's not like he's just chucking heat out there. He actually is very pinpoint and he's not really predictable in what he does. He's just a really good. He just really marks the strike zone up and down.
Yeah, and not only that, he's also very entertaining to watch in the field. His nonchalance.
Yeah, he's a really good fielder as a pitcher.
Yeah, he's a great fielder, and he just does it so nonchalantly. I think he's just a very exciting guy to watch pitch. So I think, Ranger, Wheeler, they're both locks. Harper, Bohm, both locks. Trey Turner, even though, he's barely played this season, he's so far ahead in that second spot that he's a lock. So that's 5 right there. So I think minimum.
Well, if you look at Trey Turner's stats and he did play over 30 games, so it's not like he missed the entire season. He's missed half the season so far. But
and now he's back. He's going to catch an entire month of baseball before the All-Star break as well.
Yeah, it's not like it's not comparable for him to make the All-Star game. I mean, his batting average would qualify as the best batting average if he had played the entire season. So, yeah, it's definitely exciting. But now let's transition to something that's not as exciting, Dante. And I texted you today with a topic, and I wanted you to come up with your 10 least favorite Philly sports figures. They could be a coach. I saw that you added a personality on there as well from the list that you texted me, which was a little bit surprising. I don't know what your beef is with that particular person.
I get the winner. I'll get to him.
But, yeah, let's run it. So 10 least favorite Philadelphia sports figures, player, coach, GM, and like you did, a sports personality. Give me your list.
All right. So coming in at number 10, I don't really hate this guy, but I mean, it's like, come on. At number 10, I have Jamon Brown. Okay. This guy stepped in to start 1 game for the Eagles at right guard a couple of years ago, had the worst game an Eagles offensive lineman has ever had against the Baltimore Ravens. And then to put the cherry on top after the game where the Eagles lost and he played horribly, he took a photo with Lamar Jackson. It's just despicable. A despicable act. There's no need.
That's like a personal vendetta. You're going to get mad at a guy for 1 game as in a backup role. It's not like we had seen this guy for numerous years.
It was the photo after that really pissed me off. That, come on.
If you saw Lamar Jackson, you would take a picture with him too. Let's be honest.
And not after I had an awful game.
Not after his
I'd be like, okay, I'm going to go sulk in the locker room. But if you think that's a ridiculous one, another guy considered for number 10 is Andrew Bynum. What he did to the Sixers, just absolutely.
He actually was under consideration for my list, but it was just a 1-year stint, and I had other Sixers that I had to get onto the list, so he didn't make my list.
All right, so moving on to number 9, another guy I don't hate that much, but I just really hated him at the time, so I'm putting him on here. Mark Sanchez. I think back to the 2014 season where the Eagles started off, I think it was 6-2, and then Nick Foles got hurt and Mark Sanchez had to step in. And outside of a great performance on Thanksgiving, he quite literally threw the season away, and we ended up missing the playoffs. And I was really upset about it then. Not as upset about it now, but Mark Sanchez.
Surprisingly, I had somebody from that era make my list, but I didn't have any Eagles quarterbacks make my list. And real quickly, I don't think Carson Wentz warrants even to be on this list. A lot of people hated Carson Wentz.
He's not on here for me. I'll just say that. I considered Carrie Williams. I considered putting him on here.
I considered Sam Bradford, actually. I just hated watching him just go out.
You know what? I liked him. I liked Sammy Sleeves.
I hated him. I didn't think there was anything left in the tank with him. You saw how quickly they moved on, and that's one of the reasons why I didn't put him on the list, because of what they were able to net out of him. And there was actually a couple guys that were Eagles that I considered for the list, but if you think about what they ended up turning into, or what they were traded for, I ended up just holding him off the list. So, but Sam Bradford was definitely under consideration. But I mean, we ended up getting a first-round pick out of the guy, so I can't hate him too much.
Anyway, number 7, the personality you were referring to, Joe Giglio. He's just pissing me off lately. Every time he's got something to say, it's always something to the extreme. Like, he'll either be like, "Oh, the Phillies are," he'll start talking about how bad the Phillies are and how they need to trade this guy and that guy. I think he was the one who said they need to trade Bryce Harper. But then when things start going well for like a second, he's like, "This is the best Phillies team I've ever seen in my life. They're a shoo-in to win the World Series." He's just annoying. He's on my nerves lately.
I listen to his show a lot, and I don't hate him. I actually kind of like listening to him talk, but he does die on hills with certain things. And he was also saying that Edmundo Sosa, I'm pretty sure he said Edmundo Sosa wasn't worthy of being an everyday player. And since then, they started talking about moving guys to the outfield in favor of starting Edmundo Sosa. So I was one of the original people that was on board with trying to find a way to get Edmundo Sosa into the lineup. So I mean, but it's it's the hot take, big market radio stuff. So I respect anybody that does that stuff, but that's your personal opinion, having them on the list.
What are you gonna do? Anyway, number 6, I am gonna go with, because I'm just looking at my list out of order and I'm actually putting it in order as I go. So number 6, I'm gonna go with Craig Kimbrell. Craig Kimbrell. It's not only that he was so awful in the postseason, especially the NLCS last year, but it's the fact that after that, now he decides to start throwing a changeup, and he's pitching really well this year.
Who did that happen versus? Was that Bryson Stott?
What's that?
Was that Bryson Stott? Where he threw that changeup to Bryson Stott, and Bryson Stott's like, "I've never even seen you throw that pitch before." He didn't say it, but like he was looking at him, and he was like, "I've never even seen that pitch before."
It might have been. But yeah, Craig Kimbrell, not only did you have to screw everything up in the postseason for us, but then you wanted to start pitching good again for the first time since like 2013. So Craig Kimbrell, you are number 6. Number 5, I'm going to go with Ben Simmons. Ben Simmons, you know what? I'm going to put you at 5. I'm not going to give you too much hate, Ben Simmons. I hate you because you wasted so much talent. You could have been so much better. You never wanted to shoot the ball, and you let that spiral into just, you've really dug yourself into a hole with it. You screwed things up in that series against the Hawks. Instead of answering to the fans what happened, you hid like a coward and then demanded out of Philly. But for some reason, I don't know. I don't like. I don't get me wrong. I hate him, but I feel like most people would have them in their top 3. But for some reason, I think it's just like I'm still like holding on to what Ben Simmons could have been. That like I don't hate him to that level, but I still hate him.
He's definitely on my list, and we'll talk about him
he's
more
on anyone's list,
but he's on my list for sure.
Anyway, number 4, I'm gonna go with Josh Harris. The owner of the 76ers, who thought it'd be cool to also be an owner of the Washington Commanders and the New Jersey Devils, if I'm not mistaken. A guy who just does not care about winning. He's just a shit owner in my opinion. I'm not a fan of him at all. I wish he would sell the team and get somebody in here who actually has a passion for the 76ers. I mean, you look at him compared to the other Eagles owners like Jeffrey Lurie. I mean, not the other Philly owners like Jeffrey Lurie. Guys who are very active. You know what I mean? Like they make their voices heard. You see them cutting to him during games. You see the Phillies owner, who after they would clinch a playoff series or whatever would grab a big bucket of baseballs and just toss them out into the crowd. Guys who like are very clearly love the city and love the team that they own and are very hands-on and involved. And then there's Josh Harris, who you never see or hear from. He owns, rival teams to the city. He's just looking to profit, and I just don't think he cares about the Sixers at all. And so I have him at number 4. Number 3, I am going to go with Al Horford. Al Horford, I'm going to put you at number 3. You were basically a double agent your one season here in Philly. Your sister is even worse than you. Anna Horford, all the things she talks about on Twitter. And then you go back to Boston and all of a sudden you're a great player again, helping them to a finals victory. If I can check the score real fast. Speaking of that, but yeah, Al Horford, I hate you. Celtics, yeah, they're up 78-52 with 9 minutes to go in the fourth. So he's about to win a ring with the Celtics after playing like crap for the 76ers, posing as a double agent.
It really is
Al
tough. I
Horford,
mean, being a Sixers fan, it really is tough watching this happen like this. I mean, but the reality is this kind of was foreseen to happen just because the Celtics are so
yeah.
good. I just hope they don't make a dynasty out of it. That's what I'm hoping. But I mean, they got all the tools
No,
to
I don't think they will. I don't think they will. I think it's just things kind of aligned their way in the playoffs this year. But anyway, Al Horford, you're number 3. Number 2, I'm going to go with Chip Kelly. I don't even know if I need to explain this one. Just a stubborn guy who gave up our best players for little to no reason. It just set, his whole mentality was like, oh, it doesn't matter who the players are. All that matters is my system. And, his system just did not work. After all, it was only working the years he had good players before he gave them all up. And just absolutely killed the roster, got rid of 2 Eagles legends, got rid of a guy who could be the Eagles all-time leading rusher right now. Actually, maybe he still is. Maybe LaShawn McCoy still is. But Djax would be the Eagles all-time leading receiver had he not been dealt. So, it's just a lot. I could speak for an hour about Chip Kelly, but we all know what he did. Chip Kelly, you're number 2. Number 1, just the worst of them all. An even worse double agent than Al Horford. Orlando Scandrick. I can't, like, just his face alone pisses me off. I still can't stand him. He came to the Eagles, played like crap for half a season, and then went on podcast after podcast talking crap on the Eagles, just acting all smug and cocky like he was ever, and half of a good player. And I just, and Cowboys player, I hate the Cowboys. I hate Orlando Scandrick. His face pisses me off. Orlando Scandrick, you're number 1. Screw you. That's
a
list.
pretty bold number 1. You actually missed somebody on the list that I thought would definitely be on your list, and I think maybe he just kind of didn't cross your mind, but he's on my list. So once we get to him, you can think about not having him on your list because he's somebody that I know you hate a lot. And I think he could have been number 1. I thought you were going to actually say him number 1 and maybe switch up the list that you sent me. So let's go through my list. At number 10, Jonathan Papelbon. I mean, there was no reason for
I
Jonathan.
considered Papelbon. I considered Papelbon. Definitely.
That's not actually who I was just talking about, who you missed on the list, but that's just my number 10 guy. I don't think there's any reason for him to be on the roster. The team sucked at the time, and he's just a smart ass and had a horrible attitude and would call people out. And he's just not somebody that I'm a fan of at all. And I just don't think he's that great of a person, even though I don't know him personally. Just what he's thrown out to the public, he's somebody that I just have a disdain for. And I mean, he was a solid player. He definitely was an above average player, has a pretty good resume on there, but there was just no reason for his timeline to match up with the Phillies timeline ever. So number 10, number 9, James Harden. And the only reason James Harden isn't higher up on the list is because he actually did contribute a lot to the Sixers in a short time being there. But I think he always had this little personal vendetta that he never actually wanted to be a Philadelphia 76er, and he thought he could possibly win a ring just because of how good Joel Embiid was. But when the lights shined the brightest, he just could not get it done. I mean, in the Boston series, he had his moments for sure, but he was never fully committed. And then the way that he asked out the beginning of this season and the return that they got for him, that whole situation was just a mess. And to go from Ben Simmons to that situation really irked me. And I just realized, but I'm not a fan of him now.
Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off. I just realized who you're likely referring to, the guy I forgot to put on my list.
Yeah, you already know. You already know.
Yeah.
Number 8 is another Sixers personnel, Brian Colangelo. First off, the league stepped in to hire this guy for Brian Colangelo. It went from burner accounts, which actually thinking about it now, the burner account thing is actually really funny because it actually made sense to try and motivate the players that they were trying to motivate with the burner accounts. But this was just a mess from the beginning. This wasn't even somebody that the Sixers wanted to hire, and just the entire situation, Colangelo. I mean, the management isn't that much better now. I'm not a big Daryl Morey guy myself, but Brian Colangelo was just an absolute mess. And that was just an era where they had so much opportunity to add to this team, and then the decision-making just didn't match up with what they needed to do. And during that time period, you saw what other teams and the leverage that they gained. And now we're watching a team win the finals just based off of situations from that era. So, Brian Colangelo is number 8. Number 7 is another guy that was in a lead charge role and just couldn't get it done. And then the second that he was canned, the team completely flipped it around and ended up making the World Series. Joe Girardi. I actually had, Joe Girardi. I mean, the expectations that you thought of having Joe Girardi as your manager.
And I didn't have that high of expectations. I was just excited he was Italian, but I mean, he hadn't had any success since 2009. I feel like I think this is something I've even mentioned on the podcast before, but I feel like in any sport, anytime you take a coach who had like previous success a good amount of years ago, and it's like, oh, here's a proven guy, and then he comes to a new team and he just ends up being a shit coach. I feel like that happens a lot in sports. So anytime the Philly team makes a move like that, same thing with Doc Rivers, Joe Girardi, McCarthy to the Cowboys. I can think of more, but I'm blanking right now. But I feel like it's a common theme. So I didn't really have that much of high hopes for him. But anyway.
Number 6, JJ Arcega-Whiteside. Somebody I just hated.
Come on. What side?
I mean, he sucked. There's nothing on tape that ever showed that he could separate at Stanford in college. I thought he was going to turn around at some point when he was with the Eagles, just based off of him being smart and going to Stanford, but that wasn't the case. When you look at his highlight tape in college, it's all him just mossing people, but never actually getting separation. And you just think of some of the guys that they passed up, like the DK Metcalfs of the world, to draft this guy. And there was just numerous times where Carson, as much as Carson had his lowlights with the Eagles and had his highlights too, that's why he didn't make my list, because the contribution that he actually made, and it ended up producing a championship. I mean, it felt like Carson would find him wide open and throw the ball to him, and he just could not make a play on the ball. And he was just out there kicking rocks. I don't even know what he was doing. So he just missed my top 5. But some people may consider Jalen Reagor. But if the Eagles would have not taken Jalen Reagor and taken Justin Jefferson, then we wouldn't have A.J. Brown or Devontae Smith on the roster. So that's why Jalen Reagor didn't make my team. Jalen Reagor was more of a disappointment than Arcega-Whiteside, but when you look in hindsight, it actually ended up benefiting the Eagles that they messed up on that pick, but there's nothing to mess up on this second-round pick just being an absolute whiff. So J.J. Arcega-Whiteside is my 6th overall guy. Number 5. Number 5 is Doc Rivers. And I don't think you said Doc
Is
Rivers.
that the one you were referring to?
No.
Oh, well, that's what I thought. That's what I thought you meant because of how much.
But Doc Rivers, I mean, never holds accountability for himself. I mean, ever since he's got this Bucs job that he kind of stabbed the Bucs coach in the back to get Griffin, he stabbed him in the back. He was on the staff, and then he was kind of just hanging around back scenes, just waiting for that job to open up. Told ESPN that he was going to be on the broadcast crew for the whole year and just wasn't, and takes that job. And then ever since he's gotten that job, he's just been making excuse after excuse, putting his players underneath the bus. And that was the same stuff that he used to do in Philadelphia and never really give you an actual answer of what the actual problem was. It was just excuse after excuse, never being able to get over the hump. And I just knew something wasn't right when they first hired him. And he just is somebody, I mean, it's kind of self-explanatory. You don't really have to go into too much detail of why he's on my list. And it's kind of more as a whole career and just what he did in his time in Philadelphia, not being able to get past the second round and moving on from Brett Brown. Brett Brown was kind of under consideration, but if you look back on Brett Brown, it was more so the players that he was working with on the roster and what he had to do with. But, I mean, Doc Rivers had numerous cracks with very talented rosters and just could not get anything done. So Doc Rivers at number 5. At number 4, this is the person that you missed on the list that I was very surprised and shocked that you did not mention. Tobias Crumble Cookie Harris. I don't know how this dude can't make it onto your list. I don't even know how this dude actually didn't make my top 3, because I'm looking at the number 3 guy and he could easily be switched out and substituted with him for a high role. I mean, give him a massive contract. I think the most points he scored was in the 30s, and that was like one game. He's got like less than 5 games as a Sixer with 30 plus points. Go ahead.
So, sorry, I just want to cut it. I just want to say I thought about Tobias. The reason why I didn't put him in my top 10, if we had to do a top 20, he would definitely be in the top 20. But Tobias Harris, like, one, it's not his fault that he was offered a super max deal, right? He was never good enough for that contract. It's not his fault he was offered it. And 2, his play this past season, don't get me wrong, it was god awful. But I mean, like, I think it was just regression with age, really. I can't really hate him old too much. Yeah, but some guys regress.
First of all, he's not even that old, and he's been in the NBA for a while.
Danny Granger was out of his prime and just washed up by the time he was like 28. Some guys just regress.
Danny Granger was better in his peak than Tobias ever.
Yeah, but my point is, some people just regress a lot earlier than other people do. Blake Griffin.
We're talking about the guys that they could potentially sign right now, and the Jimmy Butlers and the Paul Georges, and Tobias Harris doesn't have that type of talent, but he's like significantly.
Listen, don't get me wrong. I am no fan of Tobias Harris by any means. But yeah, no, I don't know. He just missed my top 10. I don't know. Maybe
I thought he could definitely fit in. So if you're naming Orlando Scandrick as your number 1 hated Philadelphia,
I hate that guy.
That is crazy to me.
Because here's the thing, I hate Orlando Scandrick's face, and he's a
but if we're talking about people that had more like his impact on Philadelphia wasn't. I mean, it was just him talking smack, and it just really didn't equate to anything. And it's not like the Eagles haven't had success during that time period, and it's like salt on the burn.
I mean, it's not a list of who has negatively affected Philly the most. It's who does Dante DePlacido hate the most.
True. I just thought that was interesting.
Orlando Scandrick the most. I hate him.
I mean, we sat through 5 years of Tobias Harris, but you're going to put Orlando Scandrick on your list. That's all I'm saying.
Well, if anything, I hate Brett Brown I think it was Brett Brown who stepped in at GM, and he was the one who gave Tobias Harris the contract. So if anything, I hate Brett Brown for giving Tobias Harris the contract. If I'm going to hate anybody, that's who I hate.
I mean,
Um,
that has to get clearance from the higher ups too. So I think that had a little bit more behind the scenes. But the Jimmy Butler in favor of Tobias Harris was always the move. But we can
yeah.
always just sit back and reflect on that stuff now as we watch the arch nemesis Boston Celtics coast to a championship with 3 losses total in the playoffs. But
Yeah. Anyway,
it is what it is. Number
moving
three.
on.
Number 3, that you probably haven't heard this name in a while. He probably didn't even cross your mind just because it was a long time ago, but he was just absolute train wreck, and the signing just never was going to pan out or work out, in my opinion. He was always the fourth fiddle to the Legion of Boom. Byron Maxwell, absolute disaster. Absolute disaster. First off, I hated how he looked aesthetically with those Eli Manning type sleeves that he was wearing out there.
Bad luck. Bad
Second
luck.
off, it was never a good signing, and that was just during the time period where you had the Nnamdi Asamoahs of the world. We just could not get the cornerback position correct after Lito Shepherd and Sheldon Brown. We had Asante Samuel, but they ended up trading him for like a 6th or a 7th round pick.
Well, let's not forget, in between Lito Shepherd and Sheldon Brown and Nnamdi Asamoah, we did have a success, and that was Asante Samuel. So let's put some
Yeah, but he
respect.
was already a proven guy. It wasn't like how we
Yeah,
came
but
up with Trey
so was
Vincent and
Nnamdi
Bobby
Asamoah,
Taylor.
so was Byron Maxwell. But
Yeah, but
anyway.
this is a player that you pick and choose that you think, and it was just clear as day that he was the fourth fiddle to the Legion of Boom.
No,
And the
I'm not
players around him made
disagreeing with
him
you on
better.
that. I'm just saying, like, oh, we couldn't get the cornerback position right. But, Byron Maxwell and Nnamdi Asamoah were guys who had previously played well on a different team. So, I mean, if
Well,
you're going to,
Asante Samuel played good as an Eagle. I mean, Nnamdi Asomugha was just a disaster,
I
so
know,
he
but
was somebody under
I
consideration.
don't think you're getting what I'm saying. Anyway, moving on.
Okay, number 2, Ben Simmons. Why Ben Simmons is so high is because there's so much wasted potential, and he's also somebody that I died on the cross for. I said everything in the book until the last and that I thought he would be able to turn it around. He was my favorite player in his peak and his prime, and he just really, really disappointed me as a person. And I think it goes beyond basketball, and I think he was making business decisions out there instead of actually what I know. He had injuries, and that had a lot to do with his demise, but I also think a lot of it was because he was immature mentally, and it just shows that he's just out of touch and he just doesn't know how to read a room or just read anything. And I don't know how much longer he has in the NBA. I mean, he's
Not
going to
long.
post his annual workout pictures on Instagram or whatever. He still has this big following. He goes to the Paris fashion shows. He does all this. He does everything besides wanting to play
Yeah.
basketball, and he forced his way out of Philadelphia. And getting James Harden back in return seemed like a good thing at first, and then that spiraled out of control too. But Ben Simmons, the last days of Ben Simmons on the roster the last season was just, I mean, that Atlanta series is something that's embedded in our brains for a very, very long time. You'll be telling your grandchildren about all the players that they had on the roster and then just the results. So number 2 is Ben Simmons, and number 1, your boy Chip Kelly. I mean, absolutely ruined my childhood. All my favorite players just sent him off the roster, making crazy allegations against them too as to why he
Yeah.
wanted to trade them. I mean, the only thing that really was a positive out of it was they ended up being able to move Kiko Alonso and Byron Maxwell to move up and then move up again to draft Carson Wentz, which ended up producing his sophomore season, which they ended up winning a championship off of. But Chip Kelly, not only as the coach, but also as the GM, it was crazy that they even signed up and allowed Jeffrey Lurie allowed that to happen to even give him the GM honors. But, now we have Howie Roseman and it's getting sunny out there again. So it's always Howie season, but I can't believe we went through that era of Chip Kelly. It almost felt like it really felt like Chip Kelly was trying to run a college team in the NFL.
Yeah,
And he
he
was
was.
treating the players
That's
like
exactly what he
treating
was
the
trying
players
to
like
do.
college kids
And
when they're
and
grown
his
ass men.
first 2 seasons, he had enough talent to get away with it, but then he got rid of all that talent, and it just didn't work after that. So yeah, I mean, we both had Chip Kelly in our top 2, well deserved. Just terrible, terrible guy. If I ever see him in the street, it's on site. Um, and yeah, screw Chip Kelly.
So maybe next week we can have a top 10 of a more positive thing, but we just had to get that out of the way with the 10
Yeah.
least favorite sports figures in Philly history. Maybe
Yeah,
if we had a little bit more time, we could have deep dove. And there's some players, depending on your age group and your timeline of how watching, I mean, back in the day, maybe there are a lot of people would say in the 90s, probably Rich Kotite for not re-signing Reggie White. You know what I mean? There's a bunch of different ways that you can go, but just in my 27 years on this earth, those guys have had the biggest impact. I could probably deep dive into the early 2000s when I first started watching sports, but it didn't mean as much because I didn't have as big of an understanding, and I could probably pick up more players. But Chip was like the prime of my understanding of really, really knowing what's going on with sports and being able to understand it, and him just absolutely frying the entire Eagles roster.
I think, with guys from like the early 2000s in our childhood, they're like a lot of the hated athletes from that time. We were too young to understand why they were hated. Guys like Scott Rowland, who's a well-hated guy in the city, but like at the time, yeah, I mean, like at the time, I didn't know why we hated Scott Rowland. I just knew he was on the Phillies one day, and the next day he wasn't. Another guy being Bobby Abreu. Apparently got a lot of hate.
The thing about Bobby Abreu, I loved Bobby Abreu.
Yeah, so did I. And that's what I mean. When you're a kid, you don't know any of the behind the scenes stuff. You just watch them play and you love them. So like, it's kind of hard to.
I liked Bobby Abreu because he looked like my Italian grandfather. So that's why I like Bobby Abreu.
You have mentioned that. But anyway, we're out of time.
All right, one last thing that we want to hit on. So we were talking about the NBA Finals a little bit. Looks like the Boston Celtics are going to cruise to a championship, and it really does suck. But if we go through all the major sports, at least it's not the Dallas Cowboys winning the Super Bowl. And I don't even know if the Dallas Cowboys are going to make it to a Super Bowl in quite some time. No. But on the broadcast a couple of days ago during the NBA Finals, I think it was for Game 3 or Game 4, it was very interesting. The panel brought on Joel Embiid paired with Paul George, and they asked Joel Embiid what the Sixers needed to do in the offseason to get better, and he kind of gave Paul George a side eye and talked about adding pieces and what they could do with the amount of cap room. So what did you take away from that exchange?
I took away the conclusion that, unfortunately, Paul George will be a 76er next season.
I mean, it's not the worst case. It just depends on how the deal comes out. If they give him like a 2-year deal and then there's a player,
he's getting like a 4 or 5 year max. It's going to be a bad. I'm not looking forward to it.
I know it does suck, but it's going to be good
during
to have
the first
a really good wing on the roster.
It's going to end up being, I think, like the first 2 years of it are going to be good. I don't think they're going to end up going to the finals. I don't think it's going to be enough. But I think the first 2 years of the deal, he's still going to be playing well. We're going to enjoy having him here. And then, by the final couple of years of his contract, it's just going to be another Tobias Harris situation. So I'm not excited for it. But, I mean, I guess it's not the worst thing in the world. I'm not a fan of it.
At least you're spending money on somebody that, was a former MVP candidate and is actually, has shown to be able to. And a lot of people have held the Los Angeles Clippers to a high regard because of having him on the roster with Kawhi Leonard. So they're seen as a really good duo and pairing. So hopefully if he does sign with the Sixers, which that raised a lot of antennas with that exchange on national TV with everybody watching in the NBA world. And if it goes that route, I guess it is what it is because they got to find some way to maximize this window of championship time with Joel Embiid only getting older and his body being more fragile and Tyrese Maxey on the come up. So they also have to figure out what they're going to do with the 17th overall pick. I was doing a little bit of draft study. There's a couple guys that I like, and we'll mention them on the next podcast that could be potential fits, or maybe they just go out and trade the draft pick to a team. Maybe Jimmy Butler really is available and out there, even though Jimmy Butler recently said that he wants to stay with the Heat and he's looking for money, but Pat Riley and him are kind of in a public war a little bit out there. So we'll see what happens, but it seems likely that the Sixers are going to hunt down for a forward. If it goes with my choice, I would sign LeBron for a year or two. I would even sign LeBron.
I would do that.
1 year deal and then a player option, and we'll figure it out from there. But, all we can do is wait and see what happens, and the NBA draft comes, and then NBA free agency right after it. So they're going to have to figure out something with that draft pick, and maybe they can get a ready play now player, and he could be a young guy. One of the guys that I was looking at, it's crazy, his birth year was 2005, Pittsburgh guard. So that's one of the guys that I like out there, Carrington. But we'll see what happens, and thank you guys for joining episode 51 of the Paisan Sports Podcast, and we'll be back next week.